Okay, I'd like to start on the next assignment for, again, my drawing class of 1316. We worked on last week, we were working on ideas of rhythm, we worked on this idea of repetition, worked on this idea of control. Today we're going to be working with the idea of using the graphite pencil. And as to what we did before, we're going to keep extending that into working with a graphite, even though, of course, we're not working with lines, but the pencil always makes lines. But, of course, in this case here, we want to make sure we get this idea of blending. And, of course, we're going to try to incorporate the idea of shading and transitioning and all in one. So, again, we're going to try to gain a little bit more control of that. But one of the things that we did do last week, and I'm just going to start off again with it just so you can kind of see how it works together with a graphite, is we had this idea of rhythm, and of course we went from darker to lighter, and of course we did going back to dark. But again, the lines and rhythm with a sense of control. I taught you a little bit about positioning the hand, also of course making sure that your wrist is not bent. As far as how you hold the pencil, it doesn't matter a lot. And then of course we did this nice little turning, this idea of the oval. And we also transition those two. Now, how this works out together is that you're going to have this sense of rhythm. So when you are shading, we're going to go from side to side. And then we're going to go into the rhythm of those nice ovals. And that's what's going to give us our nice blending. So again, those exercises will kind of just carry over to this idea of shading. As far as what we'll be shading is a value scale. The value scale, you can draw a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller. It doesn't matter a whole lot. A little bit bigger, probably better. So I'm just going to make a nice little drawing going across, going down. I'm going to make it just a little bit larger. Should measure it a little bit. As far as the pencil itself, this is the pencil I left for you guys. Most of you guys took one home or took a couple of them home. And you'll be using this for your shading exercises. Now, as far as could you use any kind of a pencil? Yeah, you could, but again, it might not give you the quality that you're looking for. As far as the quality, we're looking for something that has a nice sense of depth to it. As far as the graphite is somewhat soft, but at the same time, you can also make it seem as if the graphite's kind of hard, where it only comes out very, very grayish or very, very light, depending. So far here I have 12. I would like you guys to do more than 12, but we'll see how it goes from here. Now, as far as when you do draw them, I don't want to take up too much time drawing this, but it's good to see how it's drawn. As far as when you do make a drawing, you try to make sure the drawing is done well. So you're going to put a lot of time into the shading part. Might as well have a nice structure to the actual completed work. Instead of having a poor drawing, sometimes you're not even prompted to even do a good job with the shading just because the drawing looks somewhat poor. So always try to make a nice drawing. As far as the contours, I'm not trying to draw them super dark, just enough where you can see them. Now, one thing that's going to be very, very helpful too is to draw a double line. So I'm coming back a little bit on the inside and drawing a double line, because some of those values are going to be so similar, it's going to be hard to tell one from the other. And that little line that you drew is more likely going to fade in. So the gap could be a little bit more, it could be a little bit less. It doesn't really matter, just as long as there's a little bit of white to be able to see the contrast from one to the other. Now, as far as how many would I ask you to do, well, I usually would like you to do about 15, but my ruler only went to 12, so I'll just keep it at 12. As far as why do we need so many, it's because we want variety. Variety is very, very important, and especially if you want to depict this entire world that we're going to be trying to draw and eventually shade or add color to, we want to make sure that we have enough variety to be able to stretch, to be able to create a sense of what all those colors would actually break down to if they were black and white. Now, as far as the paper itself, this is the drawing paper I left for you guys. It's a nice bright white sulfite. Sulfite is made out of paper pulp or wood pulp. As far as the brightness, I think it's very, very important that it should be very, very bright. As far as the pencil itself, it's probably like a 7B or 6B pencil. As far as the core itself, it's made out of graphite, which is a mineral that's derived from coal. It's mixed in with clay. They compress it, some softer, some harder. The harder ones are going to be the H pencils, and you can get them from 1 to, I don't know, I think it goes to 12. The regular writing pencil is an HB pencil, and you can actually get some nice darkness, but you usually will see that the graphite, the core is very, very small. As far as when you do look at this one, you can see the core is actually much, much wider than the pencil you maybe even seen before. But again, this is probably like a 6B. So B stands for black, and it keeps on going to higher black, and a higher amount of black, depending on the number. As far as the pencil itself, the idea here, and it's a nice thing to be able to show you in the video, so you can actually see how I actually position my hand. In the classroom, I always tell you about be careful how you hold. Again, not calling it a pencil, call it a tool, is how do you hold it? Again, you would like to hold it with your fingertips so you can be able to feel the weight of the pencil. Also, you want to be able to stretch your fingers out a little bit so you're able to roll a little bit more. As far as when you do not bend your wrist, you're able to actually rotate much, much better. So again, those are things that I commented on previous videos. But again, you weren't working with a graphite pencil. So now you are. So sometimes you may be holding it very, very close. Sometimes you'll hold it in the middle. Sometimes you'll hold it in the back. Sometimes you'll hold it vertical. Sometimes you may have one finger on the top. Sometimes you have the fingers on the sides. It all depends on the amount of weight that you want for that value, depending on how much weight. So again, the more weight you apply, the darker it's going to look. And also, of course, you can always layer. You can layer more times to make it darker as well. So again, we're going to transition from the darkest to the lightest, beginning with the first one. So again, I want to go dark, put more fingers on top. As far as the pencil, it's more vertical. As far as this pencil here, it's called a General's Drawing Pencil. I buy them from the company Dick Blick, but you can buy them almost anywhere that you want to. They're not very expensive. They're about $1. And as far as the pencil, it's not too bad. When I use a pencil, I do not want it to be too metallic. I do not want it to be too grainy. Like this one here has a tendency to be a little bit more grainy in the sense where it does have minerals, and sometimes you're shading, and a little mineral, you can feel it. It starts scratching and grinding into the paper, and sometimes you have to sharpen it out. But this pencil is generally pretty good for the amount of money you pay for it. So again, what I did is I stroked from one end to the other end, just like we did with this exercise here. We learned to create a stroke to a certain length, to a certain width, to a certain height. And that's what you're going to be doing here too. The reason why I hold the pencil like this, or the tool like this, is I want to push all the way across from one side to the other side, but I want to maximize the length of my stroke, so it's almost finished by the time before I get to the other end. So I'll turn it this way, and I'll fill in the gaps they're missing. Now, when you see the little camera moving, it's because of the weight. I'm putting a lot of weight on the pencil to get a little bit darker. I'll try not to move the table. So again, you can go over in layers, move in a circular motion, soften it, and that's pretty full. See? So you want to make sure you stay within inside of the contours. You want to make sure that everything's well blended. As far as the next one, I'll do the same thing. Now, the reason why I put a paper underneath my drawing hand is so I won't actually pick up the graphite and move it around. Because again, the graphite is a dust, and the more you actually grind it into the paper, the more the graphite wants to just kind of float on the surface. So again, one part of the etiquette of turning in any of your drawings is to make sure that you don't have any smudges. So again, we're learning how to use this tool as effectively as possible. So again, that means no smudging with your fingertips. When you smudge with your fingertips, what happens is it looks dirty, the drawing looks very, very old, and that's not very good. So again, as far as when I do look at this one here, I'm going to notice that it's very, very gray, and that's okay, because I really want to have an opportunity to darken it. Now, I wouldn't really be able to get the eraser and erase it out if it is too light, or sorry, if it is too dark, just because it'll just smear it. You know, there's just so much graphite on there. It'd be very, very difficult to try to erase it out. It's just too much. So when I do look at them, I say, well, definitely this is like at least 2 degrees lighter. It may be kind of difficult to see from the camera, but from my eye, it definitely does look lighter, or a little bit too light. So I went over it one more time. Now when I look at it, I say, well, it looks a lot better. It might be a little bit of a stretch, but if I'm only doing 12, that's all right. So again, I rotate the paper. Now I use smaller movements from my hand, and I'll try to fill in what's missing, which are the tops and the bottoms. So again, using a little bit more of a circular motion, try to smooth in there a little bit, clean it up, and from here I'll keep progressing. Now as far as this whole idea, I'm pretty sure you've probably done this before. And again, we're trying to get a nice range. We're learning how to hold the tool a little bit better. And again, I just want to give you my own perspective, my own take as to how would I handle an assignment that's more likely been done, I don't know how many times by different types of people, in the sense of how they actually use the shading, and of course how they use blending. So again, I just want you to pick up the technique, and I want you to pick it up well. So I really want you to be able to implement the shading as a strength in all the work that you turn in and all the work that you do from here on out. You know, you want to make sure that you always have a really nice sense of variety. And if you do want to control the pencil to make sure that it's nice and smooth and soft, that's what we're looking for. Now, as far as this idea of smoothness, we haven't talked about this idea of smoothness, but the smoothness is the aesthetic. It's what makes it actually look more pleasing to the eye. If the shading was very, very rough, you'd say, well, this person doesn't know how to shade very well. You know, it's like a person that's singing and their voice sounds very raspy. They're singing and their voice is breaking. They don't seem to be able to control their pitch. They may not have enough I guess, variety within the tones that they know how to use. And you tell it's very, very novice. You may be able to appreciate it just because of the effort, maybe because of the their passion they're putting into their singing. But definitely you would say that it's a little weak, you know, because, again, the lack of control. So as far as when you are shading, we talked about, again, this idea of movement and try to keep that nice repetition. But, again, if you're shading like this and you're moving from one place to another place, remember that the pencil always wants to leave lines. So if you go a little bit too fast when you go from here to there, if you start separating too much, you'll be able to see the white in between. So that creates, of course, lines. And that, of course, creates a texture. That texture, not being smooth, is not going to be very, very good, especially when you're trying to stress this idea of control. So again, as far as this one here, very, very dark, a little bit lighter, but very, very smooth, very, very controlled from one corner to the other corner. Now you can actually see how that little bit of white actually helps out a lot. Because without that white, I wouldn't be able to see it. The lighter you go, the faster they get done. So this one here, definitely it's probably like 2 or 3 shades too light. I'll go over it again. So again, when you keep your wrist straight, you're able to move really, really fast because you are using your shoulder. Your shoulder creates the motor, and it just goes very, very quickly from there. As far as this too light, yes, it's still too light. This one is perfect right there. Turn it to the side. So as far as when you do start drawing, regardless whether it be in colors, any kind of color pencil, any kind of a medium, the drawing gets done very, very quickly. You know, you might spend maybe just a few minutes on the drawing. Usually drawings don't take very long. But from then on, you can spend almost countless amounts of minutes executing and re-executing and re-evaluating the shading. Because the shading, again, is what gives it form. The drawing itself is just like, you know, the framework, you know, a guide as to where does everything supposed to exist And as far as the technique, you want to make sure that you stress on doing it correctly. As far as this side here, I didn't leave much of a white line, so I'll come back and redraw it out just a little bit. But again, I'm very, very careful. Probably maybe going a little bit not enough as far as having enough degrees in between, because I'm pretty sure I could probably stretch this one out to 15, but I only have 12. But so I'm going to just jump them a little bit quicker so you can actually see the contrast a little bit easier. But definitely your eye has to be able to tell, is it just light enough or does it need to be a little bit darker? So again, if it was only a scale of maybe 10, it'd be very, very easy to tell. If it was, of course, 20, your attention to detail would be much higher. As far as the whole idea of blending, again, that's where I use the circular movement. When you do move the pencil in circles, you do happen to go over that same space more than a few times. So the more times you go over something, the more, of course, it blends into another. Now, as far as the paper that you choose to draw, you can use any kind of a paper, but definitely thicker paper would be nice. It kind of holds up a little bit more to the weight of your hand, and a little bit of tooth would be nice too. As far as the paper you guys took home, feel it with your fingers or your fingernails, and you can actually hear a little texture. One side will be a little bit more textured than the other, so kind of look for the one that's a little bit more textured. You can draw them both, but one usually has a little bit more tooth to it, and it'll give you a little bit better of a hold on the graphite. So again, as far as I do look at it, you say, well, these two kind of look similar, but definitely for me, this one looks a little bit lighter. So again, I'm kind of approaching it as if I was doing probably like 20, but the next one I'll make it lighter so you can be able to see it just a little bit easier. So again, turn the paper on its side. Get a nice rhythm to the movement. Stop there. Work my way back. One more time. There. Turn it this way. Now, one thing I haven't been talking about is how is your hand moving from down to the point, to the middle, or to the back. Now, I really haven't moved much as far as the way I hold a pencil, but some of you will have to just because of the way you naturally want to hold it. Some of you have a lot of memory in your hand, and usually the people that I'm most concerned with when I see them writing is they hold the thumb on the top. Those are the people I'm most concerned with when they're actually trying to shade, because they have a tendency to be too dark and too heavy. It's because they just can't help it. They want to put their thumb on top. So again, this is a tool. Think of it as a tool. Try not to think of this as a writing instrument. And of course, give it a chance. Give it a chance to hold it like this, and eventually your hand will develop some memory, and it'll be fine. But if you don't force it, it won't want to do it. Or talking about your hand, that it will not want to hold it in any other way. So right now, I'm holding the pencil right from the middle. And as far as my fingers, I have the middle finger on the side. These two fingers are pinching, but very, very lightly. Not much weight at all. I can find that this position here I can usually do very, very well to get my darks and my lights and my mediums. But when you do want to go heavy, very, very quickly, again, you want to move your fingertips to the tip and hold the pencil very, very vertical. As far as the shadings come out pretty good. I see some little areas that it's okay. If I had to be, of course, extra critical, I could be even softer. Now here, I'm going to hold it a little bit further back still. Now when you do hold it more towards the middle, of course, weight will be distributed here, but also the weight will be distributed throughout the entire length of the pencil. You'll be able to feel a little bit of weight in the back too. So that makes it a little bit easier for you to kind of let off some of that weight. So much lighter. Very good, much smoother. I'm going to go ahead and move forward a little bit faster. That won't take up too much of the time. Now, as far as this one here, I'm going to put only one finger at the top. Now, what happens if you get to like number 12 and you're already almost white? If you're almost white already at 12, that means you have to come back and darken just a few of them so you can be able to stretch it out a little bit further. Now, for this one here, I'm going to hold it a little further back. I still have this finger on top, this one kind of a little bit more on the side. Going lighter, 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 lighter. This one here, I'm going to go even lighter than that. I'm going to try to soften up my grip a little bit more. It's almost too white. Some people like to leave the last one white, but it kind of looks like you didn't finish it. So for the very, very last one, I'm going to open up my fingers, let the pencil kind of float in the center, and I'm going to just go basically just the weight of the pencil, which doesn't weigh hardly anything at all. But as you can hear, I'm actually going across the paper. But again, it has so little weight that you can barely see a mark. So that's fine there. So as far as it finished, is it finished? No, not really. I still have to come back and kind of clean up some of these areas. But you definitely can see the nice progression. From the camera, from looking on top of the camera, this one seems too light. You know, if this one's a little bit darker, that'd be fine. So this one's actually, these two are pretty, like this one here is probably like 3 degrees lighter. This one's about a little bit more than 2 degrees lighter. And all these do sequence a little bit better. But definitely this one's too light. It could have been darkened a little bit more, making this a little bit darker, and I can stretch it a little bit further. As far as are these shaded correctly? Yeah, they're shaded pretty good. From corner to corner, it looks pretty good. Remember the way it started off like this, and the pencil very, very vertical. From there, I started to lean the pencil from up to a little bit lower, a little bit lower, a little bit lower. The very, very last one was just as flat as a piece of paper, and I was holding it like this, as if, you know, it was like a conductor's wand or something like that. But still, again, trying to have a nice sense of rhythm. That way the strokes are very, very close and you avoid those gaps in between, creating texture. So again, this is the idea of doing, again, we're doing this value scale. We're doing it in these single degrees, or, you know, at least a couple of degrees in between. So you can see, you know, one from being darker and all the way over here to making it lighter. So again, making sure that you have a really nice sense of circular motion. That way the blending looks really, really nice and smooth. These can probably still be blended, and I probably would blend them again, you know, just by starting on the bottom and pushing my way forward. So again, if I started down here a little bit like this, you know, with a very, very soft hand, I would go over them one more time. But again, with the lightest amount of weight, I go from side to side, go to side to side. But that really smoothed it out much better. So again, this is a skill that I want to work with. Again, I will see you guys do this in class. But again, for you guys to get a little bit of progress, being that we don't meet twice a week, we only meet once a week, this is the idea, is to get a really good start on this. That way, you'll be prepared to do a little bit more in class and get some of that, I guess, the labor done. But again, this can be done very, very quickly. If it doesn't come out very well, I usually ask students to do it again. If it doesn't come out well again, we'll try one more time. And again, because again, this is where the quality of the drawing is going to come from. This is the aesthetic quality. So when you shade someone's face, you shade anything really, you know, the quality of the shading is what makes it, you know, it's the dress-up part. So it makes it look a little bit more aesthetically pleasing to the eye. Versus if it's shaded very, very rough, well, you can get away with it if you're maybe shading a tree or something that has an overwhelming amount of texture, you know, that you can get away with it. But and naturally, you just want to be able to control it. We want to be able to control a thing in order for us to feel like I can do much, much more with it and not be worried about doing certain things that I feel incapable of doing correctly. So again, this is about motor skills. It's not about talent. It's not about being blessed by anything. It's just about you, of course, holding the tool properly, being patient, evaluation, and of course, getting a nice sense of rhythm. So the rhythm part, that's why we did this, that's why we did this. So you can try to get a nice sense of rhythm, really nice sense of flow. The last thing I want you to do is hold it like this, bend your wrists, and when you are shading, you shade little corners at a time, shading little corners at a time, shading little corners at a time, coming back and blending, because it's not going to look even. We want this to be nice and even, nice and smooth, very, very nice and clean. So again, this is, again, what I want everyone to start with. And the next one will be, of course, to do a long transition. At least this is something you can begin with, and from here we can move forward. Thank you.